G'day, I am Debbie O'Shea, and this is the Crescendo Music Education Podcast. This podcast is being recorded on the lands of the Turrbal people. I acknowledge them as the traditional owners of the land and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. They were the first music makers on this land. And I would like to welcome to the Crescendo Music Education Podcast, Louka Parry. Hello, Louka.
Hello, Debbie. Great to be with you.
It's so wonderful that you're joining me. I first learnt about you and heard you. You're an incredibly motivational speaker at the Holt Summit. Oh, heavens, was that just this year? Yes, it
It was
was.
this year. I know.
What happens with time? I tell you what. Anyway, it was so wonderful, and I thought, yep, got to have him on and just have a chat to you about how your thoughts on educational transformation intersect with our work, for mine and my listeners, with music education. Because as you were talking, I'm sitting there nudging my friend Deb, going, music does that. We do that in our music classrooms. Yes,
Yeah.
that's us.
Honestly, I think that's true. And I'm sure we'll get into this, Debbie, but there is something just so beautiful about the creative act of music education and even the evidence around how it supports well-being and self-efficacy, self-concept, confidence. It's a really wonderful intersection because I don't just speak around the power of music in education, but of course I am a passionate musician in my own time as an amateur. And yeah, I guess I'll leave it to you to take us through some of the questions. But for me, the core of all of this, Debbie, is like, what makes you come alive? I
Mm.
really think that is just such a better question for us to ask our learners and ourselves. And if it's not being part of a performance or the discipline it takes to learn a piece of music or the beautiful emergence that is improvisation, um, with a group of other musicians. I mean, those kind of processes are the things that I think stand out to learners, especially as they leave school and go forward into the world.
Oh my goodness. Okay, the audience is now hooked. If they've never met you or heard of you, they're hooked now. Now I'm going to take a little backward step and read your
Sure.
bio so that people know where you're coming from. Here we go. Louka Parry is a renowned education futurist, learning strategist, and the CEO and founder of The Learning Future. His work centres on transforming educational systems to better equip individuals with essential human capabilities for the future. Louka has collaborated with a diverse range of organisations, including the OECD, UNESCO, Microsoft, and Apple. Oh my goodness, we'll come back to that. As a former school principal, appointed at just 27, Louka was named South Australian Inspirational Public Secondary Teacher of the Year in 2012. He holds 2 master's degrees in instructional leadership and applied linguistics, speaks 5 languages, and has studied at Harvard and Stanford's D.school. Louka also co-leads Karanga, the Global Alliance for Social Emotional Learning and Life Skills, aiming to connect global education communities to promote social, emotional learning and life skills. Whoa, what a bio!
Thanks, Debbie. Honestly, I think the subtext to all of that is I think it's just so wonderful to be able to work in learning because learning to me isn't just about remembering knowledge or I don't know, moving up the kind of cognitive ladder. It's also about self-expansion. And so I have just I felt so enabled to explore my curiosity over the now 16 years or so that I've been working in education. So,
I just love, uh, it's refreshing to have such an expansive view. I just think I'm going to overgeneralize here, just warning. But our whole systemic emphasis at the moment seems to be on data and incremental knowledge learnt and assessment. And I think we've sort of lost sight of the big picture in many ways within our systems of education.
Yeah, I think that's a fair reflection, Debbie. And of course, context is queen. So the answer is always it depends, depending on where you are and who you are. But I think that's a fair assessment. I share the same view that in this interesting moment, I think the learning sciences have been a little co opted, reduced, and now used as kind of a programmatic approach to try to support teaching quality and driven by specific data and standardized measures. Now, I'm all for evidence and evidence led or evidence informed practice, but we also need to remember the opposite of that, which is practice led evidence, right? Which is kind of the
Oh,
other side. And people don't like talking about it. And I'm really an innovator. Yes, what do we know? That's great. But just if we continually just do what we've done in the past, that really doesn't enable us to kind of step into the future, in my view. So for me, I think it's the language I love to use, Debbie, is how do you include and transcend any current paradigm? And then that kind of, to me, feels spacious and expansive in a way to say, yeah, well, we do know some things about cognitive load and, repeated or spaced practice.
yes,
We
yes.
know some things about memory that we should pay attention to from neuroscience. But I think, I like to think of all that kind of work as the learning sciences plural, and they are an incredibly diverse and interconnected body of different research disciplines. And so, if we just narrow in on one particular aspect of it, for example, just cognition, I think we miss out on the affective side, affective neurosciences, our emotional world, social connectedness, even things like exploring one's purpose, which is a spiritual act in my view. So I think so what questions are we asking ourselves, Debbie? And especially I think in this moment where I've heard colleagues with whom I disagree describe, well, what is good teaching? Well, teaching is just explicit instruction. That's what teaching is. And I just find that such a reductionist view that isn't
Mm.
really in service of a fully human education, which is like a framing that I really like. We want to educate the whole person. It's the whole point. And so, yes, absolutely, we want to make sure that we have literate and numerate young people so that they can engage with the world. But as the saying goes, those are the floor, they are not the ceiling. And my concern is if we start to command and control our systems, which I think is taking place in some parts of this country, I think we run the risk of also lowering the ceiling, especially when you look at the AI revolution happening alongside us. You look at the future of work, where actually it's about what you do with what you know, your ability to transfer from the known to the unknown. And a lot of that's around capability. A lot of it implies agency, which I think is why music is such a wonderful, and the arts generally, you know, and arts for the sake of, you can always try to make some kind of productivity argument to say, oh, well, we study this, and as a languages teacher, formerly Debbie, and a language
Yeah.
learner forever, and I was doing my Chinese, my Zhongwen study this morning,
Oh,
um, as a beginner, a beginner and failing. But what a wonderful process to go through to remember what it's like to be a novice. I think all of the kind of arts are for the sake of expression. I mean, really, you can see so much aliveness um, in the arts. And I think when we've been kind of in this obsession with STEM, which of course is critical to equip young people for the future, but of course we started with STEM and now we've gone to STEAM and now there's esteem, which has enterprise in it as well. And eventually we just get back to a fully human education, which is the whole point, I think.
I'd never even heard of esteem. Uh,
No, I'm sure there's other acronyms I haven't even come across yet, but.
oh my goodness, please tell me, are you learning a sixth language? Or is
Yeah, I am. I am learning a sixth language. But I mean, and as a linguist, I would just caveat that to be communicative in a language is different from being totally fluent. And I try to be communicative in all my languages, which means kind of a B2 level, so I could navigate myself through a country. And that's definitely my goal with Zhongwen. It's a beautiful language, my first non-alphabetic tonal language to learn. Um, and, you know, I did a TED talk some years ago, Debbie, that talked about why we should learn languages. And it was the same point, you know, why learn a language today when ChatGPT 5 audio mode can effectively do live translation,
Mhm.
you know, immediately,
Mhm.
synchronously. And that, so the whole question of, I think, the rationale behind learning is also really in an interesting space to say, just because technology can do this, should it? Should
Mhm.
it? And I think there's a whole piece that I'm paying a lot of attention to around cognitive debt and cognitive offloading. And so if we're not careful, what we end up doing is really not knowing anything at all and deferring with too much trust to some of these systems rather than the whole process of learning is to grapple and struggle and kind of not offload cognition, but actually get through it so that we've developed a competency in something. And I think, you know, playing an instrument is the most one of the most obvious ways to see that in play, in practice. You know, it's why it's such a wonderful field of inquiry. I think in this moment around what the future is becoming.
You have just brought up so many points. I was trying to take notes to circle back, but there were just too many excellent points. But I do think in some ways we're very fortunate in the music classroom because we sometimes get a little bit ignored because there's not an understanding of what we do. So therefore, we can do things uh, that are a little more relationship based, SEL based. We can
Hmm.
do these things easier than a classroom teacher can. Because you
Mm.
were talking, Luca, about our good teaching being ex skills in explicit teaching so important. I mean, I believe that having this good pedagogy is essential, but that's not what makes an excellent teacher. It's
Hmm.
it's the relationship, it's the interaction, it's all of those things that we've got in music easily when we play circle games and we're sitting there with
Exactly.
them.
Yes.
When we let them have a little experiment while they're doing a composition and they're working with their friends to decide what they would like to play and how. I just think we can do it more easily and readily in the music classroom.
I think that's absolutely right. I think it's why some of the evidence that I've seen, I did a little bit of research before this conversation, Debbie, because I never studied music teaching per se, but I studied music at school all the way to year 12. In fact, did my year 12 and year 11. I was just so involved in the music program at my school and I had the best time.
Okay, what did you do? Come
Um,
on, what did you sing or play or
well, I actually did. I grew up playing classical piano that my great aunt taught me, and it was very, I would say, discipline oriented and quite controlled. It was classical and it was trying to perfection oriented. And you know, when I became a teenager, I also, well, I think at about 12, I wanted to play the drums, and I had to convince my father at the time that that was a good idea, which I successfully did somehow. So then I picked up the drums and I found and I played in all the jazz bands, the concert band, largely in drums, not in piano. I picked up jazz piano, which kept me involved because I loved the emergent nature of improvisation. I still do. And then I also did voice. And so there was a time in high school where I was doing voice, drums, percussion, and jazz piano tuition simultaneously alongside every other thing. But you know, it's the things that stand out to me are the performances that we did. I remember going to Alice Springs once with it was a Catholic school, so we went on this big bus tour and played for a range of different schools. Just such formative learning. And I'll never forget Debbie doing a drum solo. I think it was Caravan. Da, da, da,
yeah.
da, 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 da. It was just fabulous. But then, of course, it has a ripping drum solo section in it. And of course, I just got a bit creative and ended up like standing up and walking around kind of the whole band and playing different different music stands and the whole thing, stamping my feet. It was just I just felt so alive in music. And I even for me today, I can know that to be true and still not engage in that practice as much as I otherwise would like to. So I don't have my keyboard isn't set up right now, for example. I don't have a drum kit. I live in in an inner city house. So yeah, I guess that's been my kind of journey with music. But I think you're right. I think there is just the music classroom, to put it in that regard, often it's just such a space that is embodied. And I think there's one thing, and one thing I'm really big on, you would have remembered from the keynote I did is, we have our Learning Future alphabet, and E stands for embodiment. And there's something about embodied cognition. I mean, we also saw at that conference specifically this drum corps from one of the primary schools, and they opened the conference. And my goodness me, if we could just put little brain scanners onto their heads and watch what was going on neurologically while they were performing, with such coordination, listening, like those kind of skills, I think we can get even better as educators, especially those of you working in music, at articulating exactly how beneficial this is. Because I think the argument would be, oh, well, kids don't need to play. That's not their profession, Debbie. But I feel like there's a really powerful argument we can make cognitively, socially, emotionally, for why this work matters now increasingly more than ever before in a world that's becoming digitized, phone-based. So we're becoming less embodied than we used to. We don't climb trees in childhood anymore. So there's these kinds of, well, not as much. So I think there's a lot to be done, but there's definitely, I think, ground to be, to stake a flag in the ground and say, this is why we do what we do. This is why it matters. And if you cut the arts program any further, it's going to have this kind of detrimental impact.
Okay, all right. I know everybody, all of the listeners are out there going, oh, yes. And I know what they're going to say. How do we do this?
Mhm.
But so I do want to come back to that. But you're talking about how music education can contribute to this development of essential human capabilities in learners.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that many of us try to do that. I put snippets in the newsletter and Anita
Mhm.
Collins, I put in links to research and I bang on about it all the time. Ask anyone and I'll say that Debbie just doesn't shut up about
You
how
have a
important
podcast
music
about
is.
it, Debbie. So it's fantastic, with your
Yes.
colorful hair and your earrings and all of it. So it's a whole,
Oh,
you
and
know.
even now published a book that includes
Oh,
many
fabulous.
references to this. But
Great.
I would love to know specifically some of the ways that this essential human capabilities are linked to what we do in the music classroom. And how can we use this uh, to our advantage? How can we use this to save? I'm jumping all over the place now. My beautifully crafted questions are
Yeah,
sort
we,
of
we,
going
we
out.
diverged from those pretty quickly. That was my fault.
Yeah, yeah, we're riffing, I tell you. Actually, this is Debbie O'Shea's version of improvisation. So thank you, Louka, for coming on this journey.
Avec
um,
plaisir, my pleasure.
so how can we? So one, what are the specific connections that we can make more conscious in our own work? And then I guess the second part is how can we use this for our own ends?
Great questions, Debbie. I will do my best because I don't think there's a simple answer. Again, it kind of depends who you are, where you are. The first thing I would say is thank you for continuing to make a stand for this form of education, especially when, and I think you would all know best, the pressure that this has been under as we have kind of refined our focus to what works as part of that movement. And I have a huge amount of curiosity, and I think there's fabulous research in there. But the question isn't what works, it's what matters. That's the first question to ask. And then you can
Okay.
say, and what works in order to achieve that? If we just ask what works, implicit in that is, I would say, some kind of empirical hierarchy. And we still see this, of course, in education systems everywhere, even though Sir Ken, you know, for many decades was talking about well, yeah, here's this woman, he was in the classroom, she was a dancer. And then, of course, she goes to bed, and here's this musician, you know? And so it's just so interesting when you think about the diversity of human expression, which for me, I think the first thing I would say is to have a strong philosophical understanding of your own view. And I think the stronger that is, in my experience, in working with education leaders in different schools around the world, the more able you are to really craft it, you know, to stand strong when there are particular types of sometimes political changes or pressures that are getting on you, which is to say, oh, well, we actually need more of this. So having a strong philosophy is part one. Part two, I think, is having a really clear understanding of where the research is in terms of the correlation and causal evidence for music education supporting the kinds of development that we want today. And again, Debbie, just as a reflection from me as someone that hasn't been teaching or leading in a school for 10 years, so I make that really clear as a caveat. I can't tell music teachers what to do. I never would. I would just reflect what are some principles that are underpinning pedagogy. For me, anything that is growing agency in our learners, a sense of belonging, curiosity, which is the neurobiological spark of a learning process, especially towards mastery, discernment. Are we able to pay attention to the right things? And that means, can we also engage in selective ignorance? I choose not to have all of this data come through into my brain, basically. I'm going to stay focused. You know, that really is focus.
Mm.
And then E is embodiment. That's our learning future ABC, which for me, I've been playing with those ideas for 10 years. And all models are wrong, but some are useful. And I hope that's a kind of useful one. So I would say for most music classrooms, all five of those things are being implicated. And I don't think that's the case in every classroom today. Because if you haven't got agency, you know, when do you learn to make decisions, Debbie? There
Mm.
used to be a time where you would do that quite a lot, actually, in the household at home, and you would play with your friends. And play, in my view, all the different forms of play, and there's a body of evidence behind this, of course, all develop particular types of competencies. And you have to make decisions. You have to learn to work together. You know, there's this wonderful book. It's like everything I learned about life, I learned in kindergarten, or
Yeah.
something like that, you know. And lifelong kindergarten, right? Which is the
Yes.
Michael Resnick work out of MIT. And so it's just really great stuff. You think about that. Well, I think the music classroom, the arts in particular, often are more reflective of the kind of more holistic approach. There still must be challenge, Debbie. And I think sometimes we may not do ourselves any favors. And it's often because of the realities of perhaps being a specialist music teacher in a primary school where you're
Mm.
teaching the entire school, right? This is really challenging. I
Yeah.
empathize with that role. But of course, sometimes you just have to get through. And so you can't be as well planned or perhaps as well delivered as you would otherwise want to be. So I think sometimes the critique is, oh, well, music is just fun. There's no
Mm.
real learning taking place. We need to, I would say, present a strong argument to the contrary, which is to say, actually, here's what we know is taking place. And yes, snippets in the newsletter, you know, a closely connected network of practitioners across the country. These things really matter, especially when you look at some of the evidence for the decline of creativity in
Mm.
our young people. You know, and for me, maybe another thing I just add, Debbie, is, you know, I believe there's a couple of different modes of things happening here. One is consumption versus creation. And it's too crude, and I'm generalizing, but let's play with it for a moment. What percentage of time is a young person today consuming versus creating?
Mhm.
And I really think that's such an interesting question for us, including in our own classrooms, in our music classrooms, because of course, what we want to get to is creative transfer. That's the goal. If we have young people leaving our subject with the ability to transfer from the known to the unknown, which is the process of learning, by the way,
Yes.
you know, but transferring it into new and unknown contexts as well, which is a little bit more difficult, near and far transfer, then we've kind of done our job, Debbie,
Yeah.
you know, because we're so beyond the transaction and translation parts, which is where the explicit instruction, direct instruction lies. We've got
Mm.
now people that are taking they're self-starters, they're using their own agency to make choices. And that's explorer mode, which is way better than resistor, achiever, or passenger mode. And I'm using the Jenny Anderson and Rebecca Winthrop research here from The Disengaged Teen, which is a book I love and a body of research that I'm really interested in. And it's like, so if you were in explorer mode, um, that's good for you. And guess what, Debbie? It's probably good for us too, as human beings, as adults, as professionals. Being able to feel agentic. I have value. I create value that's unique. And so there are things I think we can do in the pedagogy of our classrooms, in being able to advocate for this work. And there's also the system play, which of course is a different kind of question. It's being able to see or link into sometimes industry that are talking a lot more about skills rather than knowledge, and a lot more around character than knowledge. Um, and so being able to use those, I think, as particular types of connections while we make the case for our practice, the role of music. Frankly, I would make music education compulsory, as I
Um,
would learning another language, which other places like the IB, of course, do. And in some ways, it's not even so that you become a performer. It's just so you have the experience of expressing yourself in a particular way. And I feel like if we get too much in the kind of consumer mode and not in the creator mode, I don't think we are setting our young people as up for this very volatile and ambiguous future.
oh, mm, I could not agree more. I love that phrase, the consumption versus creation. And I can see it more and more, Luca, in my long
Interesting.
association with education,
Yeah.
where kids are coming. Some time ago, you mentioned climbing trees. They're coming into my music room and we're doing a ball bouncing game, and they can't catch the ball because they've not been playing outside. Um,
Yeah.
the length of focus is so much shorter. They don't have the language foundation that came with little nursery rhymes and songs and interaction with their families.
This
And in
the
fact,
caregivers. Yeah.
one of my dreams is my next. I have two actually. I can't decide.
Great. Tell me.
My next books. One of them is titled "Let the Children Play," because
Yeah.
they're coming without the ability to negotiate with other little kids whose turn it is, because they've never had to do that. They've
Yeah.
been either coddled or sat in front of a screen. Go
Hmm.
to shopping centres, and instead of talking to your kid when you're shopping, the kid is like literally they're only just old enough to hold a screen, and
Yeah.
they've got a screen in front of them while their parent shops, instead of the parent having conversations with them about the shopping and what they see and what they're doing. Okay, I'm going off on a tangent here,
No,
but
that's okay. We'll pin that one. I've got some reflections on that too. Yeah.
there is so much there that we need to hook into. You've mentioned several books and several authors, researchers. So I will make sure when we do
Hmm.
edit and package this, that we'll get links to all of those things, because I know I want to chase some of them down. So
Sure.
we'll put some of those links in the show notes if people want to go and chase them.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
would be good. And this
Fabulous.
creative transfer, and oh, I just love it all. But can I just put my black hat on just for a second?
Sure.
I am loving where we're going, and I'm agreeing 150% with everything you're saying. However, I think we have to be careful to not negate good pedagogical skills that sit at the bottom. Like if you don't know how you can explicitly teach and do it well, like I just think there's a bit of a danger. I've met some music professionals that's just, okay, let's just play.
Yeah.
I
Laissez
think,
faire. Yeah.
yeah, I think there's very limited value in overgeneralizing that way. It's fine if you're teaching a classroom full of Mozarts, I guess. They're absolutely brilliant and will, but we're teaching a whole range of kids, and a wider and wider range of kids as those with special needs and neurodiversity, they're all now more in our general classroom. So we do need, I still think, to have some careful scaffolding and some skill building on which to add our experimentation and our play.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, Debbie. I'm going to be curious to see where we disagree the most, if we can. But let me say this on the pedagogical question. Uh, my view is you have to deploy explicit instruction in all parts of teaching. And so I think it's a given. And I think my critique isn't that it's to do that, it's to only deploy that particular pedagogical approach. I think it's one approach across many, but there are people that say that is the entire approach, and I would disagree with them. Because I think if you look at the research, and my understanding and view on this is that explicit instruction is really effective if you want somebody to learn something,
Yes.
especially if it's kind of knowledge based and you can do a pre and a post test, or you're sharing explicit, this is what you need to know. Here are the learning intentions, here are the success criteria. This is going to be our destination. I'm very pro that. And I also think there has to be something beyond that, which is in the unknown space, because the entire world, Debbie, is unknown
Yes.
and complex and ambiguous and volatile. And so if we just think, if a young person is just getting that kind of explicit process and then they step out into university onto the workforce, where there are no, okay, well, what are we learning today? What's the explicit? We're not able to explore or navigate well. We can achieve, but I need really clear parameters to achieve, Debbie. So, and I think when you come to space like creativity, I think it's get the basics right. Do those explicitly. We know as well, by the way, as an aside from the social emotional research, that you still need to explicitly teach those things. So it's like, cool. Oh, did you notice this happened? You're bringing attention to something, because where attention goes, energy flows, right? And then that becomes part of the process. So my issue isn't so much the either or conversation. I think you have people that are a bit too laissez-faire, right?
Yes.
And you have people that are too command oriented. The issue isn't explicit, it's control is one of the issues that we have in our classrooms. And that I think is far more around an orientation I have as a pedagogue, as the teacher or the facilitator of learning, to like be gripping to the process too tightly, you know. Whereas on the other side, it's like, just allowing everyone to do their own thing without enough guidance. So I think the issue isn't explicit versus inquiry, even though that is partially the debate we see. It's guidance as part of the learning experience. And good inquiry learning is highly guided. You have to start there. But you might start with a really interesting design question, which is the beginning of your unit. And you're trying to discover that. And you're using the explicit, model of teaching, teacher-led, at key moments, but that it's not all teacher-led, because you want there to be teacher-supported and you want there to be student-led. And if we're not getting to the teacher-supported student-led stuff because we're too busy, and by the way, we have too much curriculum in Australia, right, which we're trying to teach.
Yes.
So the other
Yes.
issue.
Yes.
And so we're like skimming the surface to get across breadth, when actually my view would be you should reduce, and even John Hattie, Professor John Hattie, who I study with at University of Melbourne, has been making this point recently, that we need to reduce actually just the sheer volume of what we're trying to teach our young people so that we can go deeper and teach them less. Now people freak out. Well, what do we remove? You can't remove. But
Yes.
honestly, deep learning that's the good stuff. That's where it gets sticky. That's long-term memory. That's capability development, competency work. And so I kind of think that's my current view on kind of the pedagogical space at the moment. It's true. Laissez-faire isn't effective at all. And the whole thing of like, oh, well, you're a music teacher, just get them playing something. You get them on a tambourine like that. That's not a well-designed class either.
Mm.
There has to be always intentional practice. But if we're in an either or conversation, we've already lost the battle, Debbie. It's include and transcend. And that's hard to do because it's complex work instead of scripted, simple work. But that's really, I think, what our work is. We are complexity navigators. Every single educator that is doing good work is navigating complexity. And as you were saying, increasing complexity when you look as well at the demographics of the young people in our classrooms.
Yes. And that's the other thing that pops up into my head, Luca, as we're talking. Oh, there's just so much. I'm just going to pull out so many fabulous quotes out of this episode, I can tell you.
Okay.
Include and transcend. Oh my
Transcend.
goodness.
Yeah.
And complexity navigators. That is so what we are. And um, for those of us who might find ourselves in a difficult school situation,
Yeah.
um, it's very, we're talking about different levels of control being one of the variables, one of the things that we can take on board and think, because there are certainly, looking back at my history as a teacher, I certainly think I have erred more towards the be in control and get this done.
Yeah.
It's partly too because we do have to do assessment and we do have to do reporting, and we've only
Mm-hmm.
got X amount of time to get it all done.
Mm-hmm.
So there's
Mm-hmm.
all of those pressures as well. But it's even more difficult when you're in a difficult school where you're trying to engage students that are refusing to engage. So there's a whole added complexity around that. What are your thoughts, Luca?
Um, that's a really tricky one. I don't have a simple answer for you,
I
Debbie.
wish you did.
Well, I'm sure everyone wishes we all did. Um, Here's what I might reflect just to that. Number one is just for a moment, just stay in the energy of you're doing enough,
Mm,
you know? And I think, your question that I think we skipped over is around of gratitude. Like when you wake
yes.
up in the morning, I kind of joke about it, Debbie. It's like, wow, I made it through the night. I mean, I've got another, I've got another
Yeah.
day.
Got another
And
day.
and that's a joke, but it's also kind of deeply my life philosophy is if you
Mhm.
can live from that place, you're probably going to have a better go of it, you know? Because you're all of a sudden you're in a creator energy, you're grateful. And when you're experiencing gratitude somatically, not that no other negative emotions can really be in the body at that point in time is why gratitude interventions are one of the best positive psychology interventions you can deploy, right? Just really effective. So number one is, okay, well, I'm doing enough. I'm doing the best I can with what I have.
Yeah.
Don't be too hard on yourself, dear educator friends. You're one human being. My mom's been an educator for 40 years, going to her fifth decade. She's still teaching as well, Debbie. And she is phenomenally embodied to dance, drama, science background, just amazing educator, amazing pedagogue. But she's so hard on herself because we all are. We're like, oh, I could have done that better. I need to control the classroom. A really interesting question on this is, what is my role right now? What is my role in this moment? And I think, Debbie, this is where
Mm.
we get down into deep reflection on mental models. And my kind of view as a futurist is that we're seeing the role of the educator shift significantly, um, for a whole range of reasons. And I
Oh,
think in some
okay.
ways that's good, away from even the idea of an instructor. I'm going to instruct you
Mm.
versus I'm going to activate and facilitate this learning experience. Moving away from an instructor, a knower, a chalky.
Yeah.
I'm going to write on chalk on the board, and off you go,
Yep.
like the chalky. Have you heard that language?
Yes.
It's a bit
Sure.
dated,
We. Hmm.
but towards this idea that I'm actually going to be a facilitator of this learning experience, and I'm actually a learning architect, which is a completely different frame, as opposed to my role is to instruct you, and when you're in the instruct mode, it is about control. It's about I need to control your attention because if you're not listening to my instructions, you're not going to be set up for the next part of the activity, part of
Yeah.
this class lesson. But when you start to change into, okay, well, actually, my role is a learning architect and a facilitator of learning. And as part of that, I instruct. That I think we can allow ourselves a bit more permission and spaciousness to not be constantly critiquing ourselves when the classroom is not in full control. Because I don't know about you, Debbie, you're a practicing educator now. For me, frankly, I was hardly ever in control. It's just all a fallacy. It's as if I pretend that I can be in control. I don't think we control really anything outside of our own emotional world and how we choose to respond. That's my spiritual kind of philosophical point on this. So the rest of it's just fake control. Okay, cool. There are still like things you want to make sure are not too rowdy. You want there to be attention. And so I'm very pro on rituals and routines. So when learners enter a room, I do this, of course, with my work in workshops and school strategy work and whatever. For me, it's music's playing, particular setup, particular thing on the screen. I'm creating an environment.
Yes.
For classroom teachers, it can be the same.
Yes.
Same ritual, same routine. Why? As the educator, I don't need to be raising my voice or trying to get people's attention. The rituals, the routines, the values of the classroom, they hold the space. And then you were talking about classroom culture.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you get classroom culture right, your behavior management, which again, I think is an old framing, but the behaviors that actually can disrupt learning are potentially lessened. I would say they're definitely lessened if you've got a good,
Mm-hmm.
good climate in your classroom
Yes.
because people are more motivated, they're more open, their nervous system might be more regulated. You might have done some breathing, parasympathetic nervous system activation to bring people down, regulate them. As just come out of running around, like, kicking the soccer ball, kicking the football. So all these kind of practices, I think this is the stuff that if we can get that right, it can take a little bit of that stress off us, Debbie, from having to think that it's all up to me. It's not all up to you. It's up to us. Um, and yeah, I think that piece, just like on self-permission, but also some self-kindness. One piece of kind of research I've been running, Debbie, is I ask all people I work with uh, in some of our workshops, a set of, we call them the Thrive 10. They're principles that underpin how well you'll be or you are. And it's, vitality factors, sleep, nutrition, movement. It's some positive psychology or well-being science stuff, positive emotions, relationships, etc. The last question is, how often do you forgive yourself?
Oh, 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 that one's a
Isn't that
bit pointy.
juicy? But it's like honestly, if we're talking about self-concept and
Yeah.
self-knowledge here, which I think is a prerequisite for good leaders and good educators, often we're so hard on ourselves. And so the idea of just allowing yourself to let go, to forgive yourself, then you can experience. And honestly, I don't get this right at all, Debbie. I'm actually very self-critical. Funnily enough, it's probably why I'm talking about this. But like, can I forgive myself? I didn't do that. I didn't do that speech as well as I would have liked to. That relationship professionally didn't go very well, But can I forgive myself every night and then awaken in the morning and recommit to my purpose? If you can do that, I think, I mean, I would posit actually, I'd be a bit more than just I think. You're actually going to live a better life. You're going to feel more engaged. You're going to have higher life satisfaction. But that's some deep, some deep emotional work there, I think, Debbie, for all of us in teaching.
No, Luca, that's amazing. And I, that's wonderful advice. And I 100% think that if we all did that, it would certainly make us better teachers too. Um, and I love that learning architect and the gratitude in the morning and self-forgiveness. Oh my goodness. All right. Now, I'm going to have a quick look back through all of these amazing questions that we didn't look at all. But however, they're so
Let's
valuable.
see what we've got. Yeah, of
Okay, so
course.
let's have a look. We were going to talk about gratitude. So, well, you've actually just done that beautifully. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
I would just say gratitude is free. It
Oh,
is
I
one of
love
the
that.
best things that we can do. We don't need to go to a spa. We don't need to talk to a
Mhm.
therapist. We don't need to go out to a bar. Gratitude, you're always one thought away from transformation. You're
Mm.
always one thought away from happiness, Debbie. It's just such a
Oh,
powerful reflection, right? And so gratitude helps you get there. So I do my best because I've been following this work now for quite some time. I'd say about a decade in terms of well-being science. Uh, I do 3 gratitudes every single night with my partner. I've done that for now the last year and a half. I think we missed one night. Every single night, 3 things I'm grateful for in the morning. Um, Similarly, can you awaken and go like, wow, and I think this kind of takes a little bit of time to get there. I'm almost there, maybe. It's wow, I'm alive.
yeah.
If you can just be grateful to exist, I think there's that unlocks something for
Mhm.
all of us. It's certainly in my own lived experience, just unlocks something. And so even when you're going through a tough day, I think if you can find the gratitude in that moment, you're likely to, I don't know, arc towards laughter than tears, perhaps. You know what
Yes.
I mean? Like, because with gratitude, it's the absurdity of it all. And I've had these moments in a classroom where it hasn't gone very well, and I learn, a young person has had a real moment, and they've kicked the bin across the room. Was one example. Had many of these, Debbie. And you can just go like, "Oh God, I'm a failure. Oh, I'm just not a good teacher. I'm blah blah blah." Or you can just go like, "Gosh, isn't being alive funny?" You know?
Yes.
And you just kind of laugh about it. And kids are the best because
Yeah.
kids are so hilarious. I mean, they are the
They,
things they say, the things they do. It's just, it can be a lot when you're working with them every single day, as you all know. But yeah, there's something about just feeling grateful for the little things, even just
yes.
taking a breath, being grateful for, your lungs, that they function, that your heart beats and has beat your entire life, even before you were born. Hopefully, for many of us, hasn't stopped yet. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
So, there's just all these small little things that returns you into the present moment. And it's only when we're in the fully present moment and fully present that I think we can, as the kind of joke goes, we experience the gift. It's a present, the gift
Mm.
of being here, being alive, doing this kind of work, trying to discover our purpose, trying to shape the learning of a young person or of a colleague. Um, I think that's what it's all for.
Mm. That's magic. Oh, magic. Thank you. See, I'm just feeling a little emotional, but you're just exactly right. You are exactly right. And I think that leads you to the life that you want to lead
Yeah,
and help
uniquely
others too.
yours.
Help
Yeah,
others too, Luca. That's
yeah.
amazing. We talked a bit about intersecting between the essential human capabilities. We were going to talk about how we can advocate in educational systems to make them more human-centered. But we also talked about that a little because we talked about
Mm,
getting clear on our own philosophical stance
yes.
and working out where the research is and then making sure we've got those principles of the agency and belonging and that underpinning what we're doing. So
Mm,
we have touched on that.
hmm.
Um, was there anything else super important? We're going to talk about SEL. It seems my American colleagues quote SEL a lot. Like I
Yeah,
connect with lots of music educators,
fantastic.
and they tend to talk about SEL a lot.
Yeah.
I seems to be a bit of a big push in American schools. You don't hear so much in our school systems of it referred to as SEL and social
That's
emotional
that's
learning.
true. Yeah,
But I do think that music educators are very aware of what SEL is.
absolutely. And so I'll just make maybe just some reflections on that, why that might be the case, Debbie.
Hmm.
Because the social and emotional learning is just one kind of container for a field of research and a field of practice. And it has come out of America. It's actually come out of Chicago in particular, and what's called the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, aka CASEL, right, which is the acronym. So CASEL is about 30 years old now. And, on their board are people like Daniel Goleman, who, of course, wrote the book Emotional Intelligence in 1995 and popularized the EQ movement. And
Hmm.
kind of up to that point, we're very much in the IQ space, right? And so we now have 30 years of evidence of the impact of SEL, including longitudinal studies that show if you experience a high quality social and emotional learning program, even in kindergarten, you can tell more than 18 years later because of the impact that it's had on your life arc. We're talking lower recidivism, less antisocial behavior. Social and emotional learning, it's just why it's so funny. And because I, of course, have many SEL connections globally in my space, Debbie, and I was always a bit like, oh, how have I never heard about this? In Australia, this really is personal and social capability, or it's what we might call pastoral care
Uh-huh.
in many of the schools, right? In the public sector, it might be welfare slash now well-being. The point is, social and emotional skills must actually be explicitly taught and can be learnt,
Mhm.
and they almost inoculate our young people against a whole range of other things. They also increase academic outcomes if they're high quality. And so the connection here, I think, music education naturally aligns with social and emotional learning
Mhm.
because you have to be practicing those skills as part of it. So, and the big five, I'll see if I can remember these, but, it's things like self awareness, self regulation, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision making. That's the CASEL model, the SEL model, which is five big constructs. And there's a whole suite. I mean, there's a whole great field of research. I know the team at Harvard that does this work at the EASL lab, Ecological Approaches to Social Emotional Learning. And they have basically deconstructed and mapped all the social emotional learning programs and had a look at which ones are which one are the most efficacious, which ones are the most holistic, which ones focus on different development of different elements. In the rest of the world, and this is why we call it life skills, Debbie,
Yeah,
because SEL outside of the US is kind of life skills.
life skills. Mm.
Yeah, and so that's probably language a bit more familiar to us, but they also call them non-cognitive skills at the OECD. They call them transversal skills at UNICEF. So the point is, like, it gets so convoluted. You're like, well, what are we talking about? We're really kind of talking about the same constructs.
Yes.
They sound different depending on where you are because of the cultural nuances. So all that to say, music education develops social emotional skills
Yes.
because you are in an experience where you need to regulate, you need to pay attention, you have to work as a team, especially if performing in a group setting. Um, but even, the frustration that comes from making mistakes in music.
Uh, no,
How do you
that's
deal with
actually,
failure?
yeah, that's actually huge, and taking risks and being vulnerable. Just even having your turn at singing in the game.
Yes. Yeah.
That's, you're really opening yourself up. Um,
Yeah.
so I guess I think, and all my listeners think, yeah, we all do this. How could we be more not only intentional
Mm.
in incorporating, because I sort of think we do, I think it's more about being clearer about what we're doing. Um, how can we communicate in our own, maybe in our own planning and maybe beyond that, so we can get out there, tell our administrators, communicate to our classroom teachers,
Mm.
look at all this stuff we're doing. Like I have my own little lists and things that I aim for in early childhood, particularly,
Yep.
turn taking.
Yes.
We're not going to necessarily have a little tantrum if you don't get a turn today. And I've got different strategies of helping to teach them that concept. It's that
Mm.
sort of thing that we do. How could we intentionally incorporate these? We'll just call them SEL for now because it's easy to say, these SEL things. Even, okay, if we go to a project like Together Sing that I coordinate, where we
Right.
all sing for well-being, we sing together to belong. Let's make that more intentional and more transparent, more clear for everybody. I know. Is there a question in there? I'm not sure.
No, no, no,
Um,
no. That's yeah. I'm
okay.
sure there is. Um, I think I think you're getting onto something when you're looking at kind of what are the list of practices that you deploy, Debbie?
Ah,
And I think the general answer I would give is where are you? I think teachers are pretty tapped in, right? We do this intrinsically,
mm,
implicitly, but we don't kind of often know why we might be doing it in a certain way,
yes.
because we're very practice led, which is great. Hence the need for the evidence, right? And so the evidence might be like, actually, well, so for example, if all the kids come in and they're really dysregulated, they've just, something's happened at,
Mhm,
like using practices there to prime them. So usually that's down regulation. So it might be a breathing technique, it might be a little mindfulness technique,
mhm.
right? These things can really help because what you're changing is you're changing the state of the brain so that young people are more able to pay attention and be present. And so I think immediately anyone listening to this podcast, you could probably just go on to your favorite large language model, frankly, and or onto Google, go old school, but then be like, I want to I want to I want to add evidence-based social and emotional learning practices into my music lessons.
Mhm.
What are some suggestions? Can you make a checklist? What are the highest? And so I think those kinds of things are fantastic. I mean, there's a few different programs that I really like in all of my work. And you remember, I would have started the keynote, Debbie, with the mood meter, which is from Yale's emotional program called Ruler, which is, an emotional regulation program that was developed by Professor Mark Brackett and his colleagues. And so that, it's even just naming, name it to tame it. How are you
Oh,
feeling?
I
These kinds
love
of
that.
those.
We could do it. You could do it the other way around too. And you could plug in, here are some of the practices that I do
Mm,
that I believe help with my well-being in my classroom for my students and my SEL. Can you
mm,
tell me how this links
yeah,
to known SEL practices and research? So you could do it the other way around, couldn't you?
100%. Even just some other quick practices just to speak to. 60-second check-in circle. What's your energy from 1 to 5? One word why, you know? Close with an exit slip. How are you feeling?
Mhm.
What's a win from your message, mistake of the week to look at productive struggle and make that intentional and explicit. What was the mistake of the week? There's so much you could do. If you're doing songwriting, that's really about self-knowledge, like write a song about who you are. One thing I've done, Debbie, just as a musician myself, actually, kind of
Yeah.
a New Year's camping experience we did was that we had an audience of about 100 people or something at this thing. And I just got the keys and I said, okay, what I would like to do is just play the emotions that people are experiencing. And so I got the crowd to call out a specific emotion. And I, on my 88 key keyboard, tried to play what that emotion felt like to me. Even that is just a beautiful, and like I'd never done it before, and I felt a bit, I had to go through a bit of my own anxiety about, oh gosh, it's going to be a bit edgy. I don't know if I'm going to be any good. I'm not really a professional musician, blah blah blah. But that kind of just that experience, it lends itself so strongly, even inclusion and belonging. And in your assessments, when you're assessing, I'm sure there are the personal social capabilities already there. Turn taking, as you said, right?
Mhm.
Did you persevere? Even enabling the metacognitive view to come into force, especially as we teach older students. But metacognition is just thinking about thinking.
Yeah.
It's like, how did you go in that experience? I feel like this. Like, how would you reflect on that experience? Okay, great. Why did you think you thought that way about yourself? Those are we're starting to
Yeah.
enter the realms of metacognition, and the evidence is super clear. The more metacognition that our learners experience, the more they develop that, the better they will be in pretty well every other aspect of their lives, right? It's got very high quality evidence backing metacognition. And I think one of the challenges is to do that well, it takes kind of time and trust and all the rest of it, because it's you don't learn from experience, you learn from reflecting on experience. Said the good old John Dewey, right? It's one of my
Yeah.
favorite quotes.
But it's so true. It stands the test of time.
It definitely does. Yeah.
Luca, there's two more things that I really want to finish with. Um,
Sure.
but first, I am getting over my own feelings of inadequacy here, listening to you speak so well and so eloquently about all of these important things. I'm just in awe of your background and experience, and I just appreciate you sharing with us.
Debbie, thank you so much. Can I just make one point on this that I've had to grapple with and still do? It's I think I think the real question is how do we all individuate as much as possible so that we can be of the most service to the collective? And so to put that in simple language, how do we all become the most ourselves in order to create the most value for other people? And so I think the more that I think about this, Debbie, because it's easy to be, oh, I'm going to compare myself against you and, how
Mm.
colorful and extravagant and flamboyant you are. I wish I were, but I think the real question is, am I being the most myself? Because when you are, there is no comparison. You are exactly where you're supposed to be. You are answering the question, this is mine to do today. And I know that's quite philosophical, but I think that can be incredibly practical. And one of the activities I do with educators and principals and people I work with is I just get them to do an I am list. I am dot dot dot. I am an educator, a passionate educator. I am a music teacher. I am a pianist, a drummer. I am, and what you do, and people kind of they get to about 10 and then they struggle.
Yeah.
But the point, and that's so interesting because we are not one thing. We are multidimensional beings. So the push here is like, how many identity markers can you really claim? Because that sheet of paper that represents you, I should be able to pick it up and go like, oh, this is Debbie. And
Wow.
yet what we kind of do is we live other people's stories. You know, we kind of like, we absorb and internalize other mental models. This is all just part of being human. The expectations of others actually have a significant impact on us. We know this from the interesting research. So yeah, I just feel like it's, am I doing what's mine to do today? Am I growing? Do I feel like I can be the most myself? And that journey is the journey of self-actualization. And as Maslow, I think, put really beautifully at the end of his life, of course, sadly didn't enter to the mainstream consciousness. The highest level on the hierarchy of needs, which if you recall has basic needs, like physiological needs, social needs, underneath it underpins self-actualization is becoming who I am supposed to be. The highest level is actually self-transcendence, which is, well, once you've become who you are, the point is then your ego should dissolve and you should just become part of something bigger than yourself. And I think one of the things we've done, sadly, in our modern world is we've got a bit hyper individualistic. And even the fact that Maslow's hierarchy doesn't include that final step, because he was just publishing it when he died, I think also speaks to this a little. It's like, am I creating unique value in the world? And I would say for anyone listening, as a music educator, honestly, I think back to my music educators with incredible fondness
Mm.
and for who I became through the experiences that they created for me. That just is, that's real work. Um,
Mm.
anyway, it's just something I reflect on most days, Debbie. Um, you know, how unique am I operating from a place of uniqueness? And I love the word uniqueness because it's not about competition. Of course, we need competition in particular parts of healthy ecosystems, right? That's how nature works. But yeah, there's just something I think beautiful about that framing.
I love that so much. That is amazing. It actually also has implications for the way we work with our children too,
Yeah,
to help them find their uniqueness.
yeah.
I mean, I know they're very young, still things are forming,
There's a
but
lot of exploration ahead. Yeah.
a lot, but they still need to feel a sense of who they are.
Hmm. Yeah. I think that piece on identity, it's one of my favorite sayings is it's not what you know and it's not even what you do with what you know. It's who you are as you do things with what you know. So that's just getting down to that level of identity. Because otherwise, if it's just what you know, hey, pull out your book,
Yeah.
we're going to do a pre-test. There's no relational element there, which we know isn't going to be used. It's transactional. It's transactional teaching. And what we want is relational teaching. Because the
Um,
relationships are the whole point of being alive, I think, Debbie. I'm still figuring this stuff out myself,
oh,
still making my mistakes. But I think this is something really beautiful about I see you and the person you are becoming. What a beautiful thing to be able to do every day to work in a human system like a school.
Luca, that is so amazing. I actually think that we should finish on this, but I want you to repeat that saying, and that will be our
Okay, sure.
your last word. I could, oh goodness, this it's just been a complete delight, Luca.
Oh,
And
likewise, Debbie.
thank you
Uh,
so much for joining us. But I do want to hear that quote
sure.
again. It
I'll
was
say
so
it.
good.
I'll say it once more. And again, it's so easy to say these things out loud, but of course, to embody them and to try to live from that place is, I
Mm.
think, the real journey for every one of us. But I would say it's not what you know, and it's not what you do with what you know. It's who you are, or even who you are becoming as you do things with what you know. And that takes us well beyond knowledge. It even takes us beyond skills, takes us deep into character formation. And if we need anything at this point of our human trajectory, it's probably character. Who am I? What is my ethical and moral duty to this moment, to the young people around me, to my local ecology? Yeah, I think it really matters. Thanks for what you do, Debbie. It's been a delight.
Thank you. And we will keep in touch. Goodbye to all my fabulous listeners, and thank you, Louka.
My pleasure. Thank you.
As we know, laughter relieves stress. Don't lose sight of the funny side of life. How do you make a tissue dance? You put a little boogie in it. Thank you so much for watching our Crescendo Music Education podcast. For more information about all things Crescendo, including membership and music education resources, visit us at crescendo.com.au. Don't forget to like and subscribe